Welcome to the Lay Low Pod, the podcast that keeps it real while you figure things out. I'm Erin, and let's lay low. If you're in a season of becoming where life doesn't look how it used to, but not quite how it will, you're in the right place. Sometimes to grow, you have to lay low. Hello. Welcome to the Lay Low Pod. My name is Erin. I'm so glad you're here. It is the weekend and I was ready for it this week. It seemed like it was a short work week, but also I was cramming in everything into 4 days, which I probably wasn't the only person doing that this week, but I'm so glad it's the weekend. I have kind of a mixture of friend time, some happy hours, some drinks, I'm going to a concert, going to see my nephew play baseball, just a good combination of plans mixed with home time. That to me, that makes a perfect lay low weekend. I have things planned, but also plenty of time to relax, and I am ready for it this weekend. It's summer. I know a lot of the people who have kids in school are now out for summer. That is something that I have retired from life in, and I'm not mad about it. I told my friend yesterday, it was her 40th birthday, and I see all of her posts with her kids and just writing them everywhere. And I told her that enjoy these days because you won't realize how tired you were until they're over. And that is just the truth. So I see all of you moms and dads doing all the crazy May things, and I'm wishing you all the luck and hopefully you guys have a good summer. I was thinking too about what I did for summer when I was a kid, and my mom was really big on experiences, and she would make a big poster board, and at the top it would be like the summer chart. And she'd list out all the things that we were going to do that summer, like try new restaurants or um go on family walks, read certain books. Like she kind of just had all these ideas planned for the whole summer. And then we would mark them off the list and put little stickers next to them when we completed them. And then when we were done with the summer chart, we would get to go to Six Flags over Texas. That was like our big fun thing to do in Dallas growing up with Six Flags. So my mom was always putting experiences first for our family. We didn't do any really big trips. You guys know by now that travel is so important to me, but growing up, we only did really small trips going to see family or, camping cabins with friends. But the first big trip that we did was a summer trip. I think I was in middle school. We went to Mexico to an all-inclusive resort. And I remember having my first strawberry daiquiri in Mexico. I remember ordering a virgin drink and then the guy giving me a little wink and handing me the drink, and I drank all of it. I don't even know how old I was, but that was probably our first big trip. And then when I was in high school, we were supposed to go to Paris, and that I was really excited for that. I wanted to go far, far away. And I was super disappointed when some things came up and we had to cancel that trip last minute. And so I went to college, still not really going on any kind of a big trip. And I remember my sophomore year of college signing up for a study abroad, and it was going to be in Italy. And I was going to go and spend the whole summer in Italy. And I was really excited to get that going, and we paid the deposit and everything. And then I met my future husband in February of that year. And I remember being so in love, I just couldn't even leave. There was nothing was going to stop me from being with this man. And I canceled the study abroad trip and didn't even think twice about it. I remember my parents telling me, you should still go. He'll be here when you get home. But nobody was going to tell me otherwise. So I canceled that study abroad, and I ended up getting engaged and getting married in the fall. And I didn't make my way to Europe, which in my head was like a big trip, was far away, would be across a big sea, right? So I didn't end up going to Europe until I was in my early 30s. And that was really a huge trip for me that changed my religious outlook. And I want to talk about that today because a big part of my story really is that I was raised in the Mormon church, and in my 30s decided to leave that and take more of a spiritual route. And that is something that's going to come up quite a bit whenever we talk about different topics, just because it's a big part of who I am. And I think anybody who has left a high functioning religion and chosen a route with less structure, less rules, it's a real shift of identity. And it's going to come up in things that I talk about, but hopefully I can be very respectful because there are a lot of people in my life my son, my mom, my sister, who are important to me, who are still in the Mormon church. So I want to start talking about this as part of my story today. And I think back about that summer that I was supposed to be in Italy and I canceled it. And I think, oh my gosh, what if I would have gone? How different would my life have been? But I don't hold on to that thought too long because I really just love my kids so much. And I had a great chapter of being a mom early on that I wouldn't trade that for anything, obviously. So I don't think about it too much, but also I think about how I felt when I got to Italy. And you can't help but wonder if my life would have gone a different direction if I would have had that experience when I was 20 versus 30. But I went to Italy with Perfectly Posh. That was a company I was working for, and they had incentive trips. And that was the first big incentive trip that I earned. That was in Europe. It was my first time to Europe, and I was so excited. We went to Rome, and we went to Florence and kind of Tuscany. And I wasn't drinking at this time. I remember being at the winery and not having any wine and wanting wine. But I was like, nope, I have people here know that I'm Mormon. I want to be a good example. And so I remember that so clearly that I know that that part of my story, I was still practicing Mormon and was not drinking. I remember, so that just shows how involved I was with my faith at that time. I remember going to the Vatican in Rome, which is really like the birthplace of the Catholic Church. And we spent the whole day at the Vatican. And I remember walking through the halls. And if you've been there or if you've seen photos, it's hard to even comprehend, honestly. It's so old. The buildings, the paintings, everything's so detailed, and everything centers on the Catholic faith. And I remember being in this building and just thinking like of the history and thinking of really the foundation that this religion gave to not just this country, but like our culture. And I remember thinking at that time, wow, this is so different from what I am used to with my religion in the Mormon church. And I remember that was really the first time that I started thinking about what I had been taught my whole life. I remember coming home from that trip and really questioning a lot of things. And I came home and thought, okay, so this is the story I've been told my whole life. And I've been told not to question it, not to really look into it very much. But here I was at a time in my life where I just couldn't continue on without looking into things and trying to find some answers to some of my questions. And that's really what kind of started me down my shift from being in the Mormon church to following more of a spiritual path, which that is where I am. And I feel so great about where I am and feel so connected to God and the universe right now in my life. But I think back about this time where I was just really confused and I was having just all these new feelings that I hadn't thought about. And I felt scared to question and I felt scared to look into it. But I came home and I really questioned a lot of things and started down the journey of some church history. And it didn't take me very long to have a lot more questions than answers. And I was never that person. I'm probably maybe more people are like me than I realize. I don't know. I didn't feel the need to find lots of big answers. I didn't go down the rabbit hole of needing to know facts and exactly what happened, but I knew enough to know that what I had been taught wasn't necessarily what happened. And I just knew enough to know it didn't feel good to me anymore and it didn't feel right for me anymore. And that was a scary place to be when I was in a community that was pretty much all Mormon, where a majority of my friends were Mormon. I was taking my kids to the Mormon church, and it was just a really uneasy time for me. When I talked to my husband about it, it was just, we were just on such different pages. And he let me know that it wasn't something that he wanted to be involved with, being in a relationship with me not being Mormon, that was that important to him. And it was a deal breaker to him. And he told me that. And that was one thing that you don't forget hearing. This road was scary. It was scary to question everything that you've always been taught. And for people who are still in the Mormon church, I think it's easy to think, oh, they just are lazy, or they don't, they want to drink, or they want to do this or that, and that's why they're not Mormon. But to be on my side of it, to question everything, it's just really a really hard spot to be in. When people ask me why I got divorced, I typically will say, that's such a loaded question. And we all know that there's a lot of factors that go into something like that. But what I've kind of made peace with is I say I left the Mormon church, which means I left my life. And that's really the only thing that describes it in a way of how I really feel. And I felt that giving up the Mormon church, it just went so hand in hand with everything that I had built and so much of my identity, that it felt like leaving the Mormon church meant leaving my life. And it was just a really confusing time for me. I wanted to have a connection with God, with a different type of God that I knew. I had to really work through my relationship with God and Heavenly Father and what it looked like for me. And I felt so connected to just a source in the universe. And to me, everything kind of wrapped up in one. So it was like God, the universe, and source were just all one thing, all one energy. And I just felt that I didn't need to know exactly how it looked, but I knew how I felt following my own spirituality, and it felt more aligned for myself. That's really the only way I can describe it. And religion in general is not a topic that I love to talk about. I need to do this episode because I need to update you guys on about where I was, because it was such a shift going from this small town Mormon community and raising my kids in the Mormon church to being on the other side where I was doing things that I had taught my kids never to do. And they would call me out on it. One time they took the wine out of the fridge and went and threw it in the dumpster. And I remember clearly them saying, "Mom, you have told us not to do this, and now you're doing it. Why?" And like how confusing that really was for them. We navigated a lot together. I ended up telling my kids that, I wanted to support them in the Mormon church. And this was during the divorce, where I said, I'm going to go to church with you guys for a whole year, and I'm going to go and I'm going to sit with you. And then after 1 year, I am going to make the decision to not go anymore. And I hope that you can support me in that the way I'm supporting you by going with you for a whole year. We have a whole year to keep going together and to kind of like transition together. And after that year, I would drop them off during my parent time. I would drop them off at church if they wanted to go, and then I would pick them up. I'd always ask them, we can go to church or we can do this or that, because, you only had so much time with your custody time. And I wanted that to really be their choice if they wanted to go to church. And typically they would want to. It was really all they knew. And they were doing this with their dad as well. So, of course, it's just part of their routine. So after that year, though, they supported me. And it was kind of just like a transition where Mom didn't go to church anymore, but they had the choice. It became a time where I wanted something. I just needed something to fill that spiritual part of my heart and my soul that I wasn't getting from the Mormon church. And I really had to develop that on my own. And it's almost like a muscle, I go to the gym and I do the same workouts, over the course of 14 days, and I'm working the same muscles. And they're getting stronger, but they're getting stronger because I'm using them, right? So if you think about how to listen to yourself and how to connect with spirituality, it is the same thing. It's something that you can develop. It's something that you can strengthen over time by putting forth effort. And that's really what I did. So I want to talk about some of the things that I started with, just in case, I don't know, you could be in a religion that you're very happy in. And some of these things can just add to it, can add to your relationship with God, with the universe. Or if you're finding yourself in a time right now where you're not really sure what you think, tell yourself that it's okay to not know what you think. Oh my gosh. I'm actually listening to a book right now called Don't Believe Everything You Think. And it just keeps coming up in my head, like all these little things. But just because you have a thought doesn't mean you have to find the truth. You can have a thought, think it and let it go and not let it consume you. And I think that's what I did with the Mormon church and especially the history. I think I just realized that I didn't need to know exactly what happened to know that it didn't work for me anymore. And there's beautiful things about the Mormon church, and it brought me a lot of peace and stability for a long time. But it doesn't work for everybody. And as I got older and I had more experience and my brain developed, I just had to look for other ways to connect with a higher source. And that's what worked for me. But it's just so personal. And I think that's why I don't love to talk about religion that much, because I just want to respect everybody's personal connection with God. And it's just not something that I feel the need to discuss. I want to just honor that in everybody and let everybody believe and worship how they want. And especially with my kids, my family, I always want them to know that I respect their beliefs. And just because I have a certain feeling doesn't mean that I'm pushing that on them at all. So where did I start? So I was coming up to the city for my gypsy lifetime, and I joined a yoga studio in Salt Lake. I remember walking in and meeting the owner, and I just probably looked like a lost puppy. And I walked in and I said, I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know. I've never been to a yoga class. I've never done this, but I just feel really called to try this. And he looked at me and he said, "You are home now." I remember that. His name was Ron. He said, "You're home now." And I say I studied, because that's what it felt like. I studied yoga at the studio for years and made great friends and had beautiful experiences with teachers. And one of the teachers, her name was Rocky, and she would burn her Palo Santo and she'd have candles. And after class, we would sit in a circle and draw like affirmation cards. And I remember being so connected and feeling very spiritual in that space. And I met one of my very, very best friends at this class. He would set up his mat kind of across the studio. And I just think with my schedule, we would always hit the same classes together. And we would always just kind of like look at each other and give a little smile. And after, months of that, we would chat in the lobby after class. And then one time he always wore a wedding ring, which in my world, I just didn't really have a lot of guy friends. The only guy friends that I had were my friends' husbands, which were always complicated. I will tell you that. Like, I don't know why, but it was. So I remember seeing his wedding ring and just being like, oh, I can't really talk to him. But then we would just chat and chat. And one time he asked me, "Do you want to go get a smoothie after class?" And you guys, we are like in months of this class. His name's Thomas. And I was like, "Well, are you allowed to like go get a smoothie? Like, is your wife okay with that?" And he was like, "Oh my God. Yes." He's like, "She is a career girl. She is working. Like, I actually don't even want you to meet her, because once you meet her, you won't even want to hang out with me anymore, because you're just going to want to hang out with her. Her name's Holly." And I remember him telling me that, and he was just meant it. He was just like, "No, you can't meet her." So I was friends with Thomas for a full year before I met Holly. And he was right. The minute I met Holly, we were just little soulmate besties, and I am the godmother to her beautiful daughter now. And Thomas was right. No, just kidding. We have fun all together. But I made this really special friend, and going to their house, it makes me just want to go to their house right now. It is got the best energy, and they have like Buddhas and crystals and rocks. And I remember going over there and just feeling so much peace. And one time Holly had a tarot card reader come over for one of our daughter's birthday parties, and we sat around in their living room that they made this like little cozy spiritual nest. And I just remember feeling so connected, um, and felt really close to God and the universe at this time. And this was very early on, and I just hadn't had these experiences before. And these friends are family to me now, Thomas and Holly. And I am going to get both of them on this podcast because they have such incredible stories of change and strength, that I want to share with all of you. Another thing that I did that was really powerful for me was I started following the moon cycle. And it's really just a way to have accountability. If you think about it, the moon cycle, it goes from new moon to full moon to new moon to full moon. It's about a month long. So if you're following the moon cycle every 2 weeks, roughly, there's a new moon, there's a full moon. And it's a good time to check in with yourself. And that's kind of how I used it. I used it as a time to stay grounded, to have a check in with myself to make sure I was on track. And I started doing 10 wishes. So this is a great spot to start. If you are just starting into manifesting and you're just like, where should I start? I don't even know much about it. This is such a good practice that can really, really help. So 10 wishes is you get a piece of paper on the new moon. You can do whatever you want. I would light a candle. I would maybe sage the house, and I would sit down with my pen and paper and I would write out 10 things that I wanted to happen. And I would write them down as if they had already happened. That's the thing with manifesting. You always want to think about it that it's already happened. So I did this for years, you guys. I pulled out one of them. I have kept quite a bit of them, but I pulled out one from June of 2020. So this would have been when I was still living in the country. And I wanted to read my 10 wishes because it's just so funny I always say you only look back to see how far you've come. And I think about summer of 2020 Erin and what she was dreaming of and manifesting. And this is it. So these were my 10 wishes. I would just write them down. I am happy and healthy and have a kick-ass summer body. Okay, Erin. God, I was just pretty vain, huh? I am a positive, joyful addition to people and would attract the good people around me. I don't dwell on people who don't make effort to be in my life. Okay. I don't yell, and I have a lot of patience as a mom. Yeah, there were some really stressful mom days in there. I have great quality time with my boys and make good memories. I have my own space to live in the city somehow. That one was on my wishes for a while. I just knew I could get to the city. I didn't know how, but I knew I could get there. I have more than enough money and I am out of debt. My business has boomed. I have welcomed a pure, true, healthy love into my life by a man who I adore and who adores me. I am happy and healthy and excited about the future. So those were my 10 wishes that summer. And I would fold them up and I would either keep it under my bed or carry it like in my work bag where I could see it all the time. But my 10 wishes just kind of stayed in there. And then the next new moon, I would pull out my paper and I would see, okay, which one of these things actually happened? And then the ones that happened got off the list and I would start a new list with new things. And I did this for years. And I feel like this was the first thing that I did that really worked for me. Month by month by month by month, I just kind of built my little wish list and I would just cross them off. And then I would just keep dreaming and keep wishing. And this is such a good practice to start with if you are wanting to get into manifesting or any kind of, positive affirmation. That's a great thing you can start with. Another thing that I did was I really tried to get into nature more during this time. My dad always told me that he was never religious, but he said he always felt close to God when he was golfing or in the mountains. And I feel that. I definitely feel that. So I would do lots of hiking. And man, I live in such a beautiful place with such beautiful hikes. I literally live right between two huge canyons in Salt Lake City that have more hiking than you could ever imagine. And it's a huge blessing for me. And I'm not a big camper, but I went with my friend Val and we did a camping yoga retreat. And it was like this spiritual thing. And I'd never done anything like this. I remember borrowing Judd's, one of my best friends, Judd, his tents and his air mattresses. I basically went to his garage and like took everything camping, and I was like, okay, I'll bring all this back. I went on this retreat and I set everything up. And I remember, I'm not a camper, you guys. Like, I need a bed. I could do like trailers or RVs or something, but I am not a girl that sleeps on the ground. I'm sorry. But I remember just feeling really connected with nature during this time. And it was just a good time to get quiet with myself and feel close to God and the universe at this time. And we did my very first sound bath on this trip, where you kind of lay on a yoga mat and they come around and they have all these ways of making sounds and vibrations, and they'll kind of walk around and do it. And it's just like a really peaceful experience. I actually have gotten my mom into sound baths now, which is really fun. At my social club, they do them twice a week. And so it's really fun to take her to dinner there and to do our sound bath. But that was a really cool way that I felt close to God and the universe and spirit without any type of religion. And I think that's really all I was looking for. I was wanting to feel close to a higher source in a way that worked for me. And I had learned by now that these rules just didn't work for me. The history of this faith that I was taught in didn't work for me. There were culture things that people can say, oh, that's just the culture part of the church. But guess what? That is still part of the church. And that didn't work for me. And just for a lot of things, it just didn't work for me anymore. But I still wanted to find a way to stay connected to God and the universe. So sometimes growth begins with curiosity. And I would say that's really what happened in Italy. I think I went to Italy with an open mind, and I opened up to a huge world that was so different than anything I had experienced in my one stoplight town. And I came home looking for answers of how the feelings that I felt in Italy, how does that work to my life in this one stoplight town? And that curiosity really did spark the question of, how can I feel spiritual without going to church every week? And I had to work through that myself and find ways that worked for me, which I did. And now I feel more spiritual than ever. I feel more connected than ever. But you don't have to have all the answers to realize that something just doesn't fit in your life anymore. And it's okay that you can make a change. And to me, spirituality became less about rules and just more about connection and just allowing myself to be me after years and years of guilt and shame and a religion that just didn't work for me. It just didn't anymore. But when you can slow down and start listening to yourself, listening to your intuition, you realize that your gut is all you need to guide you. And the more you can connect with that inner voice and with your gut, the more you'll know the path to follow. And that's the part about slowing down and learning yourself and getting in tune with yourself to know the answers, because those answers are inside of you. You don't have to necessarily look for answers in anything outside. You have them inside of you. I think when I think back about this transition and what was hard and also what made a huge difference, it was having a supportive family. Because let me tell you, there are people that leave high functioning religions that do not have a lot of support on the other side. And people ask me often, how was your family during this faith transition? And I'm so proud to always say, well, first off, my dad wasn't religious, so he was just like, do your thing, girl. My mom told me, just be a good person, and that is all that I've taught you to be. And so both of them were really just wanted me to be happy and wanted me to um, find my way. They were always so supportive. My siblings were really good. I know it was probably hard on my sister because she is very active Mormon, and I'm sure that she struggled with it in her own way, but she never let that carry over into our relationship. She never made it about her. And I did have a family member who in her own way, tried to make it about her. And she told me that I don't know one person who left the Mormon church and that was ever really happy. And guess what? I could be the first person that you know now that I'm all these years later. Guess what? File it in your file folder that I left and I have never been happier. And I think that it just takes respect and it takes understanding that people are going to evolve and change and take down those expectations and just replace it with love. If you have people going through this in your own life, the advice that I can give you is to just lead with love. Don't pressure them with questions because they might not know the answer, and that's okay. You don't have to know all the answers. Just follow your gut and follow how you feel. I just don't think the goal is really about becoming somebody new. I don't think anybody goes into this thinking, oh, I just want to be a whole new person and I want to blow up my life and start again. I don't think that's what it is. I just think that you're trying to return to who you are after letting go of all the expectations and everything that you've been told, getting rid of all the noise and just digging deep to think, what do I think? What do I believe? Does this work for me? Or can I find a way of something new that can work for me better? And it's so personal and it's can be a really scary place to be. So if you're feeling like you are one of these people in the middle of change with your own belief system, be easy on yourself. Be patient with yourself. Tell yourself it's okay to not know how I feel. And as things evolve and things come to the light, you'll slowly morph into exactly who you're meant to be by letting go of all the things that you're not. Sometimes that's all we have to do is let go of all the things that we're not to see what's left, and that is our truest self. Thank you for laying low with me today. I would love for you guys to send in your questions. I'm starting to get some, and it's going to be fun to talk about some of these topics. Also, I am going to be getting one of my best friends on here who is a licensed therapist, and I want you guys to send in questions. If you are not in therapy, if you've been against therapy, ask yourself, if I went to therapy, what would I ask? And ask us. Okay, I'm going to get her on here. We're going to answer your questions. But yeah, this has just been so fun for me. I feel like each week with you has just been so healing for me. And just thank you for giving me this space to do this. Thank you. Thank you. And I would love to, if you could leave a review on either Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever you are, please rate and review. I did get my first 1-star review, which means somebody who hates me is listening. And I hope you know I love you because no bad blood here. But let's get some of if you are enjoying this or if you want to just do me a solid, leave a good review and also share this with anybody that you think might enjoy it as well. But we'll see you next time. Thanks for laying low.